I mute myself now.
Beautiful. Welcome everyone to Partnering Well in Parenting. Nice to have you here. The first thing I'd like to do is acknowledge the country that we meet on. So say Kaya Wanju, hello and welcome everyone, and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we meet. For me, that's the Whadjuk Noongar people. I'd like to honour their continuing connection to land, waters and community, and pay my respects to elders, past and present, and to their parents who've been parenting here for thousands of years. Second thing I like to do always is say thank you, parents. Thank you so much for everything you do. Specifically, thank you for carving out this time to be here this morning or to listen in afterwards. I really appreciate everything it took for you to get here. I know it's not easy. And even more importantly, thank you for all the hard work that you do for your children. It's really vital work. You are so important to them. Everything you do for them matters. So thank you. My name's Belinda Smith. I work with Miralinga Parenting Service, and we offer funded parenting services to those in the Southwest Metro region. And today's workshop is focused mostly on ideas from hand-in-hand parenting, and there's a few other experts that we draw on as well to make this an evidence-informed talk. So thank you to those who've come along. I will just let you know that this workshop is going to be recorded, and we'll go through a couple of Zoom pointers in a moment. And over the course of today, the first thing I'll do is talk about who this is suitable for. Then we'll look at the causes of stress in co-parenting relationships, and sadly there are many, and some tips to keep the partnership working well. And finally, the big takeaway I hope you have from today is that putting our children's needs first is the number one way actually to support our co-parenting relationship. So for Zoom, we ask that at the start you have your video on just so we can kind of wave at you and say hi, but staying on mute and unmuting when you wish to speak. Specifically for today, please practice self-care. If there's anything challenging, if you need a bit of space, please take your time to move away. And also note that this is recorded and will be distributed as an audio. So this workshop, who it's for, and those listening in, you'll also receive the PowerPoint presentation that I'm referring to here. So this webinar is appropriate for co-parents, whether they live together or separately. And in fact, it's actually helpful for anyone who shares care of a child. So it may be that a grandparent might find this useful. However, it's not suitable for individuals who have encountered domestic violence or for those who are separated and unable to communicate with their co-parent really at all. So it does have some strategies that rely on that base level of being able to communicate with one another. So the first thing we're going to go through, and today's workshop will be a relatively short one of just 30 minutes or so. And I'm just going to talk for about 25 minutes, I think. And then we'll stop the recording and there'll be time for those attending to ask questions. So welcome to those who've arrived. I'll just let you know that we're recording this. Here we go. And we're about to talk about some stresses faced by parents. So just remove that. So the first point to know is, as we know, the work of parenting draws really deeply on us. It's such an intense, very joyful at times job, but it really draws very deeply on us and pulls deeply on our emotional resources and has big impacts on our feelings of choice and often our feelings of enjoyment of our lives. So this lack of support, this feeling of being really exhausted, leaves us feeling quite guilty about when we reach the end of our tether, feeling quite confused at times about what's really needed, often feeling very, very isolated, thinking that we're alone in these struggles, and generally pretty exhausted. So it's hard for us to problem solve and to put our self-care at the fore. We also face stresses like rigid roles. In our society, men and women particularly are really hemmed in by the roles that we're assigned and by those patterns that we often fall into because it's what we know. So it can be quite hard to make changes in those spaces and can leave us feeling pretty unhappy, pretty stressed. So Compounding this is communication issues. Often we don't start with a huge toolkit of communication strategies and skills, and that's magnified when children arrive and we're sleep deprived and we've got our separate ideas coming from our own families of origin that we're bringing to this situation, and they don't always match up. And so how do we work together? So these are really normal stresses faced by parents. And we often feel quite isolated from one another, like we're on different teams, because feelings can be activated by the actions of our children. So we can get all sorts of big feelings arising from the way our children are in the world. And it's hard for us to find the time to reflect on this and to take responsibility for our own feelings. And often, because we don't have time to reflect, we just react and then feel quite badly about that, and then turn those feelings onto ourselves in the form of guilt and onto those closest to us. So we can really bring in feelings of superiority or inferiority, my way's better than yours, and end up feeling like we're very separate. So again, I think the key message here is there's nothing wrong with you if this is your experience. This, unfortunately, is the way parenting has ended up in our culture, because we just don't support parents enough. So solutions for all of those stresses, sadly, are really beyond the scope of this short webinar mostly. There are going to be some key things that you can focus on to help offset and prevent the stresses that I've just described. But really today is about preventative measures that you can put into place to help keep your co-parenting relationships strong. And those broader challenges, things that parents face like sexism, like racism, those are going to need some additional support in all sorts of different ways. And longer parenting workshops can be a really good way for you to build support for yourself. So much longer than this short 30 minutes, but actually an 8-week session where you meet for a couple of hours a week can be a beautiful way for you to share successes and challenges with other parents. Miralingo Parenting Service offers these every term, as do our partners Keys Parenting and City of Coburn, so you can check out the term planner for opportunities to participate in these workshops. So today is going to offer you 7 key tips for how to partner well in parenting, and hopefully give you some practical tools for how to make things work, and share a few stories with you. So I've listed them here on this first slide, and you will then hear some more detail about each. So I'll go through them now. Number 1, put your child's needs first, and that's the big one. Number 2, finding someone to listen to you when you find things hard. Number 3, communication skills, specifically respectfully communicating. And number 4, the icing on the cake, is warm communication. So respectful is one thing, but bringing a real warmth to our communication can really help. Number 5, scheduling in regular connection time for you and your co-parent. And number 6, being flexible and compromising wherever you can is a great way to help things run smoothly. Number 7 is consistency, but it's perhaps not the kind of consistency you might think, and we'll go into that. And some of the practical tools we'll talk about are really simple things you can do in the moment, tagging out, taking the lead, a needs map, or connection plans, which I'll talk through with you. So, number 1, putting your child's needs first, and this is by far the most important thing to do. I've put a link on the PowerPoint presentation to a great podcast with Emerging Minds. Emerging Minds is an organisation that works to support child and adolescent mental health. This podcast is all about positive post-separation parenting. So if you're in that situation where you've separated, it gives you some advice, some information, and tells you what the research has shown around how to have a positive experience post-separation. And the second link on there is a guide for separating parents. It's really useful, lots of stories in there. It's just maybe 15 or 20 pages of some support for how to do it well if you are a separated parent. One practical tool for putting your child's needs first was recommended to me by a woman called Marion Rose, who's in the parenting world and is wonderful. She suggests keeping an empathy journal. And what that looks like is that you actually write about your child's experience. How is it to be 13? You know, what are your needs every day? What are you looking for in life? And how are those changing as you grow? You being the child that you're empathizing with. And then could you describe a typical day for that child? So what's it like for them from the moment they leave your care and go out into the world? Or even before that, what's it like for them when they wake up? How do they feel? What's going on for them? That can be a really powerful way of putting your child's needs first. And then really considering what you can do as probably the most important person in their world at this stage to continue to nurture their confidence and curiosity about the world. So that's the key point for today, is putting your child's needs first. And if you can do that, that's going to equal a much more seamless co-parenting relationship and a child who ends up with really great outcomes.
Melinda.
Apologies, go for it, Bernadette. You wanted to ask a question? And I've just, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I unmuted myself. Yeah.
Lovely.
So I just wanted to check the empathy journalist, we putting ourselves in our child's shoes and writing as our child.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So just really considering, what does the world look like for my 4-year-old? What does the world look like for my 13-year-old? Just imagining waking up in the morning and what life is like for them, what their interactions are like, what their experiences are like. And that can really give us some great insights and some thoughts for how we can engage with them. Now, all of the things that I'm suggesting for you to do rely on you being in a pretty good place, actually, with your co-parent. It's hard to do these things if you are struggling with your relationship. So one of the most helpful things I've ever found to do with that is to find someone to listen to you and your challenges. So particularly your concerns and your sense of urgency on important matters. So instead of venting them onto your co-parent, berating them, finding fault, choosing a safe person to vent with and release those tensions can then allow you to talk with them more reasonably, more rationally, and in a way that's going to get results. So this safe person ideally would not be someone in your family, someone who does not have skin in the game, someone who's outside of your family system and can just listen without interrupting, giving advice or trying to fix, and without judging anyone, knowing that all of you are doing your best. So I will be sending a handout about something called listening partnerships that Hand in Hand Parenting suggests as a great way to relieve the stresses of parenting. And the other option, of course, is counselling or therapy. But just finding a safe person to really let off steam with is a great way then to show up calmly and confidently with your co-parent, whether you're separated, whether you're still together. It means that you can work through all the difficult parts in your head. Oh, I'm so frustrated about this. Figure out a direction and then go to them calmly and say, I've been thinking about this. I'd really like it to change in this way. How do you feel? And you can have a bit more space in that moment. So when you do communicate with your co-parent, respectful communication, as we know, is really important. And what that looks like is really speaking to them as you would maybe with a colleague at work. And respectful communication relies on a few things. Some regular communication helps build that connection, and that you're calm with it as well. So consistent lines of communication is important, whether that's just via text, via email, or if you're co-parenting with your partner, you may want to have a regular time each night for just a couple of minutes, a check-in. How was your day? How are things with the kids today? How do you think they're going? If you are separated, having a formal parenting plan can help establish clear guidelines and can get you on the same page and help you feel a bit more in control of the situation. So a parenting plan can take any form. It can just be a one page about which days they're spending where, or it can be a 30-page document going into what you've agreed upon for the kinds of food they'll eat or how much TV time they'll get. It can be as detailed or as simple as you'd like it to be together. It's a team act, so it's not one parent writing it and passing it to the other, but it's something that you write together, sign and date. It must be made free from any threat, duress or coercion, and it's not actually a legally enforceable document. It's different from a parenting order, which is made by a court, but it's just a really helpful way to get on the same page. And I would suggest that parents who are together could also do something like this to talk through what you want to see happen in your family. So there's a couple of links on the slideshow here. The bottom one, the Share and Care booklet, is a template. So it takes you through all of the different elements of a parenting plan and prompts you to think about the different elements of that. So respectful communication, super important, particularly avoiding criticizing. Whether that's to your children or to others in the family, taking the high road is really important. And whether you're separated or together, avoiding criticizing is a really helpful way to help things go smoothly. If you are what I call a two-home family, so you're separated and your child has two homes, they still think of you as a family. Whether you talk or not, you're their family. So I love to think of it as a two-home family. If communication is really tricky, you might like to talk to your child's other parent in a public place. Arrange to meet in a cafe or meet them at school. Or if it's really difficult, use email or text messages so that you can keep that respectful level of communication going. And remember, don't try to communicate when you're angry or upset via text, via email, or in person. It's best to just say, I'm feeling really upset right now. Let's talk about this tomorrow or next time we see each other. If you do have a difficult moment, repair is a powerful way to model to your children positive communication skills and a great way to keep things going smoothly. So, for example, I'm really sorry. I didn't handle that conversation well yesterday. Let's try again. It's a great thing to model to your kids. So respectful communication is super important. And if you want to take it to the next level, communicating warmly is where the power lies. So the percentage of non-verbal communication for us as humans is huge. In fact, research shows that only about 7% of our communication is the words we use. Approximately 43% is the tone of voice that we use, and about 50% is our body language, our eye contact. So 93% of our communication is non-verbal. What that tells us is, it's not just what's happening, it's how it's happening that's important. So things like sharing appreciations openly and regularly to your co-parent, but also about your co-parent can be really helpful. So saying to your child, wow, Daddy's so generous. I'm really pleased that Daddy's so thoughtful. Anything like that is going to be really powerful in building that warm relationship. And offering, this is huge, offering 10 appreciations for every course correction. Very difficult, certainly not something I've managed generally. But if you aim for the sky, you might hit a street lamp, but if you only aim for 1 to 1, you're probably not going to reach that. So aiming high and offering as many appreciations as you can, really teasing out the things that they do well, is going to allow that co-parent to flower. And saving corrections for a time when things are emotionally neutral. You might even schedule it. I'm feeling really upset right now. I'm really unhappy with, I keep coming back to screen time because it's so often a challenge for co-parents. Really unhappy with how much screen time he's had today. Could we talk about that on Saturday night when I'm feeling a bit calmer and we can work it out together? Much more effective way of dealing with problems. Another thing that I've heard suggested that can have a really big impact is stopping before you enter the house. So say you're getting home from work, your co-parent is in the house with the children, you stop for a minute in the car, take a few deep breaths and really consider entering with warmth. So instead of entering the house and saying, oh, hi, yep, right, I've just got to do this, and being busy and distracted, bringing yourself, bringing your presence. Hi, everyone. Oh, it's great to see you. How's your day been? So that warm, spacious communication really helps. And another thing that can help is our non-verbal communication is based on often things we're not even aware of. So if you have a co-parent who's in another home that you're communicating with via text, you might change the image that goes with their phone number to that of your children, so that when they're calling or texting you, the image you see is that of your children. And that just immediately sort of softens your heart, warms up that communication, and allows you to feel a little bit more connected. So that's some ideas for communicating warmly. Scheduling regular connection time. I mean, again, we don't have the opportunity in this workshop to talk through why feeling connected is so important for us as humans, but it's really the fuel that drives our brains and bodies. So having that time together is absolutely the foundation of building a positive co-parenting relationship. For those who are a couple or in the same house, a parenting expert, a relationships expert that I've read about said that 20 minutes per day, which seems like a high amount to me, is ideal. That you schedule 20 minutes per day to just be together without distractions, devices, children. But even 5 minutes per day will have a lasting impact, and literally even one moment of hi, how are you, is going to have an impact. So those micro moments of connection build up too. For co-parents in separate houses, in separate spaces, scheduling regular connection time is really important. You may just do this by emailing once a week, back and forth, to say, how do you think the kids are going? Or you may actually schedule a meeting. I know of one family where immediately after they separated, they decided to have a weekly coffee meeting while the kids were at school, and they scheduled it into their diaries and met at the cafe because they felt that they might get a bit heated if it wasn't in a public space. So very cleverly thought, right, let's hold ourselves to account, and actually had a list of discussion items, so an agenda for that meeting. And once a week they met together to talk specifically about their kids. And 6 or 8 months later, once the dad had a new partner, so this was a mum and a dad that had split, the dad had a new partner, the new partner started to come along to these meetings as well. Now, obviously that's a pretty high bar, but if it's something that you can do, it's really going to have such a beautiful impact on your children's lives when you're working as a team to meet their needs. And the last thing that might be really helpful for you in terms of connecting with your co-parent is trying the listening partnerships tool that you will receive a handout about. So that's just scheduling in regular time where you trade 5 minutes each, say. You set the timer, and the person talking gets to talk, and the person listening doesn't interrupt, doesn't offer any advice, doesn't try to fix it. So that can be a really powerful way to get to hear one another's views fully and to feel like you're being heard. Number 6 is around flexibility and compromise. And of course, it's super easy to just throw it out into the world, be flexible and compromise. It's hard to do. So particularly around suiting children's needs, being flexible with schedules and arrangements. So I'm a single parent, and if my kids say, oh, I'd really like to stay with daddy an extra day and it works for him, then that's fantastic. Being flexible with those schedules and arrangements to suit the children is absolutely required. And I would say if safety is covered, if you know your children are safe, then do not sweat the small stuff. Again, very hard to do, which is why that second point of you having a listener who can listen to how frustrating it is that they get fed too many lollies when they're with the other parent can be really helpful for us to try to let go of some of the small stuff. If that small stuff, quote unquote, is impacting you, then finding a time to discuss it respectfully and to problem solve with curiosity and empathy can be a good way forward. So starting with, this is a great strategy, I've been wondering how you feel about bedtime. What are your thoughts on bedtime? And then just being quiet and just listening to the response of your co-parent to hear what they're feeling and thinking about it. And you might learn some really interesting things there. But the tendency can be to go in with, I'm not happy with bedtime, you need to sort this out. And that never ends well. I speak from experience, bitter experience. So offering that curiosity and empathy to start with helps everyone to get on the same page. And I would say that consistency of routines is ideal, particularly around hotspots like screens and bedtimes. So try including those in your parenting plan if you can. But a big part of being flexible and compromising is accepting the limitations of your influence and control. So particularly co-parents in a different house, you really don't have a heap of influence and control. So you need to keep your eye on the ball, and continue with that respectful communication and really work on what you can influence and control. The last point is consistency. So agreeing on some routines and guidelines together is, of course, the ideal situation. It really helps your child if they're not feeling too bamboozled by complete differences at different houses. But the reality is that we do all sorts of things differently, and our children cope generally very well with that. When they're at school with a teacher who does things a certain way, when they're after school care with someone else who does things differently, when they're with nanny who does things differently, when they're with us, they are very much able to cope with the changes there. What consistency do they need though? What they really need, and this is very well borne out by research, is at least one adult who can listen well to their feelings and who they feel deeply connected to, who they feel seen, heard, understood, and loved by, at least a good chunk of the time. Obviously, we can't be perfect parents all of the time, but if our child knows we're there for them, that's what they need in order to flourish. And they really need parents who keep them in mind and put their needs first. If they get that consistency, parents who are thinking well and thinking about them, then whether they do 30 minutes of screens or 60 minutes of screens in a day is really, the icing on the cake. It's not the core issue. The core issue is parents who are considering what their needs are. So some other practical tools that you might like to try. These generally involve discussion prior, so you can bring this to your meeting. So for parents who are in the same house together or who spend time together, so tagging out. This relies on the parent who's struggling being the one to call for help. You don't want the other parent trying to step in. So tagging out is an agreement that if things are getting tense, you'll call, I need a tag out, I need a break, and ask that co-parent to step in and take the lead while you go and take a walk or have a cup of tea or speak to a listener on the phone and tell them how hard it's been. So that's a wonderful way to team up as co-parents. Practically, arguing kindly is actually one of the most helpful things we can do for our children. If our disagreements are handled with respect and kindness, we're actually teaching them vital relationship skills and supporting them to have a solid experience of relationships in the future. Sadly, if they're not handled well, parent arguments can be deeply traumatizing for children. And so it's important to know at that point not to pick up big guilt sticks for ourselves, as again, Marion Rose talks about guilt sticks a lot, but to just know that our children can heal from those challenging moments, but extra support might be required. So that practical tool there is to aim to argue kindly, to argue with respect. And if you're unable to do that, to aim to support your child through that, with either you listening to their feelings about how hard that is, or maybe getting some external support from them for them there. Taking the lead is a really important thing to do. Whoever is parenting, let them parent. Very hard. We want to step in. We want to give our advice. We want to, call them on things that they're not sticking to. But unless safety is at stake, then you might just say, oh, I feel pretty upset about how that just went. Let's talk about that at the weekend because I really want that not to happen again. Even better, step away and maybe send that as a message or talk to them about it later when you're feeling calm. So the aim of the game here, of course, is that we're keeping a nice, calm, reasonable space for our kids to feel safe and secure in. Now, a connection plan is an idea from hand-in-hand parenting. It involves putting pen to paper to think about your whole family and how you're connecting with one another. So we have plans for our toothbrushing, dental hygiene, how often we go to the dentist. We have plans for our healthy eating, meal plans. all sorts of different plans. And in fact, connection is just as important as the food that we eat. It's just as important as those other health focuses that we might have. So putting pen to paper to schedule in one-to-one time with each of our children. Might just start with 3 minutes each, or it might be a whole afternoon. Thinking about micro moments of connection. Maggie Dent talks about this beautiful spot on the back of their backs here, where if you give them a little rub as they walk past, it releases chemicals into the brain to relax them. So just those little micro moments of connection. Oh, I need to offer more eye contact. I can't remember the last time I giggled with my child. Those are going to really build up your relationship with your child. And the same goes for your co-parent. How are you going to schedule in connection time together? When was the last time you giggled with your partner or your ex-partner? Can you find 20 minutes in a day? Can you find 3 minutes in a day to sit together and talk about how you're going with parenting? Can you schedule in a 1-hour coffee date once a week or even once a month? So a connection plan where you actually write it out is a great idea for prioritizing your family's mental health and helping your family to thrive. And the last one here for the practical tools is a needs map. This is an idea from Shelley Clark of Mind Body Parenting. I love this one. It's a simple way to list out what everyone needs and problem solve together. So imagine we've all gotten up in the morning, we're all feeling a bit grumpy, and I start grumpily doing the dishes, feeling very annoyed that no one's helping. One sibling elbows the other one and starts poking them because they really want to play, but they don't know how to ask for it. And the co-parent disappears into their phone, trying to ignore everything. So it can be a bit of a schmozzle. But what we can do is stop and say, okay, everyone, let's try and get this Saturday on track. What does everyone need? And maybe I might say, I need a half-hour walk by myself down to the beach. Great. Maybe the co-parent says, I need some physical activity. I want to go for a jog. Great. The 4-year-old is bouncing off the walls. They need to go to the skate park and move. The 7-year-old is exhausted from school all week. They need some downtime, a quiet cuddle with a parent reading a book for a while. And so we build that into our morning. Maybe we do each of those things as a family. Maybe we divide and conquer, but articulating everyone's needs and actually physically listing them out on a piece of paper can be a great way to help everyone feel seen and heard and get their needs met. One book I wanted to recommend to you, it's not hand-in-hand parenting, but it had a great chapter on date nights for parents who are together to talk through the parenting information in the book. It's by Justin Coulson. It's called 10 Things Every Parent Needs to Know, and it has a great chapter at the end giving you prompts for this date night where you talk through strategies and thoughts and reflections as a parent. It's also good to know that there are some wonderful workshops around co-parenting after separation and divorce with Centrecare, with Relationships Australia in WA. And this Up to Parents that's linked here is online resources from the US, but it's got some lovely videos around how it impacts children when we do things well and when we do things not so well. And the hand-in-hand parenting link there has an article on partnering well in parenting with some of the information that I've talked about today. I've also linked here our resources for parents and carers handout with some helplines and some great websites that you might like to look at. And of course, our Miralinga contact information. So in summary today, I'm hoping that this webinar has given you a better understanding of the causes of stress in co-parenting relationships, and hopefully it's not new to you, the idea that it's not your fault, that things are tough, but hopefully it's stressed to you that it's not your fault, that co-parenting can be a really tough thing to do. You're hopefully also going away with some practical ways to keep the partnership working and an understanding that it is our responsibility. While it's not our fault that it's tough, it's our responsibility to do our best to help things go well, and also to focus on children's needs as the #1 way to help everyone thrive. And lastly, how and why to ask for help. So I've listed lots of people you can go to for help. Certainly, I'm one of them. There are a lot of people and organisations and groups that exist solely to support you. And there are many, many people in your life that care. And if you need help, please ask for it. Particularly, all of us need someone to listen well to our challenges and our successes as parents. So finding someone who can listen well, I think, is the number one way to help parenting go well. So I'm going to stop sharing there and say thanks to all of those who are listening in. Um, and I hope to see you at another Miralinka workshop soon. And to those who are on the call today, we'll have an opportunity now for some Q&A.